Let's do this one last time. Finally, we are on the last part of Ouroboros, Part 4, The Way It Ends. By the order of the Overseer Council, the following file is Level 6001 classified. Unauthorized access is forbidden. Item 001, Level 6 Cosmic Top Secret. Containment Class, Esoteric. Secondary Class, Principalis. Disruption Class, Amida. Risk Class, Notice. All things must end. Special Containment Procedures. It is imperative of the Overseer Council to establish the containment of SCP-001. Description. To know the nature of SCP-001 is to know the nature of the Foundation. For more information, see Document 001 GOI.1 Operatus. Addendum 001.1. Attached documentation. Enter encryption key? Yes. Decrypting. The first man stood alone on a barren field and looked in the distance. He saw the locked gate beyond which his greatest shame was kept. He turned to the snake who writhed on its belly like a worm and cursed it for its treachery. "You tricked me," the man said. "You led my hand astray, and now we are damned for it." The snake sighed. "I gave you knowledge," it said, "and with that knowledge you made the choice you made. I could not make it for you." The man cried out, "All the same, trusting you was my greatest mistake." "No," the snake said. "Your greatest mistake was believing you had a choice at all." Access document 001/GOI1 Operatus. Should intermediate vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? Decuro catalog number SC001-13/001/1. Document type Summa Modus Operandi. Dates received, not available. Operation status, closed. Forward. We, the Delta Command, do hereby set in motion the principles of this document, the summa modus operandi of the Chaos Insurgency. We hold the following to be inescapable truths. The Foundation overseers have altered the fabric of reality for their benefit of their own wicked desires. These alterations are the source of all supernatural activity in our universe. These grievances we hold against them. The 13th Overseer has blasphemed the natural order in his foul contact to stay the hand of death, and has usurped the fragile balance of life and given impenetrable shield to the horrid adulterers of the Foundation. The 12th Overseer has stolen the wealth of the world to benefit the Foundation's insidious designs, and has taken the fruits of many millions for the purpose of turning those labors against the laborers. The 11th Overseer has spun a circle of lies around the world to protect the Foundation's interest, and has cast a dark eye onto the void to gaslight and prevent true human understanding. The 10th Overseer has kept a dubious record of the Foundation's malfeasance and altered history to suit them, and has mocked truth and reason for the sake of maintaining the Foundation's cruel legacy. The 9th Overseer has betrayed the trust of their fellow man and sworn allegiance to the cancerous council, and has time and time again turned away from opportunities to strike them down to prolong their greed-riddled intentions. The 8th Overseer has committed wicked acts against the ignorant public for their careless use of nuclear weapons, and was one of the first to breathe life into an organization that should have been butchered in the crib. The 7th Overseer has manipulated innocent populaces to create chaos and destruction for the Foundation's benefit, and has shown nothing but contempt and malfeasance against the innocent and unwitting. The 6th Overseer has surreptitiously use the might of the American military machine to crush the Foundation's enemy and wrought a tale of never-ending violence and bloodshed that has forever stained the world. The fifth Overseer has warped the very boundaries between space and time to extend the Foundation's cruel reach and taken dark and horrible secrets from those far-off places to use them to fuel the Foundation's death machine. The fourth Overseer has lulled the nations of the world into believing the Foundation means them no harm while working alongside the same treacherous intentions that would see the planet laid to waste. The third Overseer has used mankind's own technologies against them to act as the all-seeing watcher of the Overseers, spinning a web of eyes that has eroded every last shred of human privacy and decency. The second Overseer is complacent. The first Overseer has established a council of monsters and demons that answer to his beck and call, so all he may do is sit on his foul throne atop a putrid wound of the Foundation and lap like a dog from its seeping, pustulent orifice. The Overseer's cancerous, anomalous influence on the world is a wound on the fabric of the universe. A wound that festers cannot be healed until the irritant is removed. The 13 Foundation Overseers are the irritant and the wound of our reality. The 13 Foundation Overseers must be removed by the order of the Engineer, and those who step down. We stand in defiance of this aberration. We stand in opposition to the blasphemy against nature. We stand insurgent against this chaos. Our path is clear, our vision unclouded. We must clean out the womb. We must let our universe heal. We must destroy the 13 Foundation Overseers. Hereafter, we of Delta Command see the summa modus operandi as transcribed by the Engineer of the Chaos Insurgency. Step 1-13. 0513, the other Overseer. Formerly Dr. Felix Carter, Caucasian male, date of birth unknown, was once a doctor for the research consortium named the International Academy of Existential Sciences, early conspirator of 051, and the individual called the administrator, supposedly was a bargaining chip used in a deal made with death itself to allow death a seat on the council while it grossly prolonged the lives of the Overseers. Presumed extremely dangerous. Location is only specified and considered impossible to reach. Chapter 1. At the Precipice. Earlier. The proceedings came to order in the back of the room of the abandoned Somali warehouse. Calvin sat at the head of the table, of a long plastic folding table, quietly picking at a fingernail. At the other end of the table were huddled the 7 members of Delta Command, the High Council of the Chaos Insurgency. Calvin almost rolled his eyes when he had been ushered into the room. For all their soaring rhetoric, they were still unable to come up with anything more substantial than dusty old buildings and cheap plastic furniture to conduct their business in. Delta Command, he knew, had been formally formed by the Engineer to bring together the 7 squabbling branches of what had been called the insurgency. Each of the 7 groups sent a representative to Delta, and together they formed the larger resistance. The name was a joke, of course. According to legend, the Engineer had nearly given up trying to coordinate the bickering factions by saying, "Never in history has a more chaotic insurgency been mishandled into existence." The name stuck, though Delta always thought that chaotic insurgency wasn't nearly as dignified. Thus, the Chaos Insurgency. None of these people liked each other, nor did they care for Calvin. He had a distinguished career as a Chaos Insurgency agent, first supporting and later leading larger attacks on the Foundation. He, like all those within the insurgency, knew their place in the world. The purpose of the insurgency hadn't ever been to destroy the Foundation, just act as a check against it. The constant thorn in their side, never allowing the Foundation to become too complacent. If they were focused on the insurgency, the logic followed, they wouldn't be able to do as much damage elsewhere. Thus far, the strategy hasn't panned out. But Calvin was exceptionally good at his job, and less a thorn and more hacksaw in the gut of the Foundation. His contributions to the insurgency's goals had brought him swiftly up the ranks, and at one point in the recent past, he had been considered as the next member for his faction to join Delta. Shortly beforehand, however, he was accused of mishandling insurgency resources, limited though they were, in a raid on a Foundation site holding several potential magic texts. Although the investigation against his actions hadn't amounted to much of doubt, this incident came at the absolute wrong time, and he had passed over for ascension to Delta in place of a mid-level bureaucrat who had previously been a junior congressman for the state of New York, Howard Kowalski. Coincidentally, it was Howard Kowalski who spoke first. "Good afternoon, Calvin," the portly man said, balancing a thin pair of glasses at the end of his pointed snout. "We appreciate you, making the trip out here. As you know, we're in the middle of, renovations to the Delta Command headquarters." This was, of course, a joke. Delta maintained that their former command center, the one built by the engineer himself, was being renovated, necessitating the empty warehouse and dingy back alley gatherings of the group. It was a public secret that the building had been leveled by the Global Occult Coalition nearly 3 decades prior, though Delta refused to acknowledge this. "So this will have to do, I think." "Yes," he nodded and tapped a stack of papers against the desk. "I guess what we're most curious about here, Calvin, is, this document we hear you've recovered." He leaned forward, the glare of a lamp catching his glasses as he peered over the stack of papers. "The journal. Do you have it?" Calvin nodded. "If you allow me a moment of your time, I promise we'll talk about the journal." One of the other members of Delta, a tall, long-haired woman named Norris, made a sound in the back of her throat. "Don't test our patience, child. It's bad enough that we've had to suffer the journey out here, but I swear to God, if we did it all so you could bullshit around with some fake book, I'll have your job." Kowalski laughed nervously as Calvin raised an eyebrow at the outburst. Now, Priscilla," Kowalski said cautiously. "Let's just hear what he has to say. Calvin has really done a lot for our organization, and I think we can all agree." Grudging nods were had all around. "And I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt here." He motioned to Calvin to go on. Calvin picked up his own sheaf of papers and opened it. "All right. So what you are seeing in front of you is something I've been working on with a few people over the past few months. Call it a statement of purpose. We've been working in conjunction with Dr. Vernon Alderman's lab in Sydney, and the results of his team's work have been troubling. The Foundation's continued testing of unnatural entities and phenomena have exacerbated the problem caused by those same entities. They're itching at a wound. Couple that with the knowledge we gained from Lieutenant Horver's team regarding Scranton's Anchor calibration shifts in the last few years, and the evidence is clear." He paused and flipped to the next page. "We're quickly reaching an endpoint." He scanned down further on the page. "Now, our current models estimate that we might not make it out of the 2020s without a major public supernatural event, and then not even have another 5 years past that before we start seeing some things too big for even the Foundation to deal with. That's not good, and is the reason we need to address this now. If we wait any longer, we might not be able to do anything of value. Sylvester Stallone," yeah, I'll call him Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stallone, the oldest member of the Delta, hacked out a queer cackle. "Our value comes in inhibiting the Foundation's efforts. What it sounds like you're about to say is you intend to interrupt them entirely." Calvin leaned back slightly. "More than that, I intend to uproot the Foundation, leaf and stem." A thick silence plopped down over the group, as if someone had just thrown a rotten egg into an elevator. Herman Van Garndy, another one of Delta's veterans, was the first to laugh. The rest followed in quick succession. Kowalski tried to keep a straight face, but even he was rubbing his eyes before too long. "Calvin, look, I know you mean well, but you know you've got a lot of respect from all of us here, but come on! That's a fool's errand." Priscilla sneered down at him. "When you can come up with the money, men, and equipment to destabilize the world's most powerful, secretive, influential agency, You can let us know, and we'll make you the king of Shit Mountain. How's that sound? Calvin raised both eyebrows this time and took a deep breath as he flipped further into the stack of papers in front of him. To this end, he continued, I'd like to cite the procedures established in the Summa Modus Operandi. Delta fell silent. A few of them looked towards each other confused. Sylvester Stallone's eyes suddenly became very sharp. Is that so? Hang on now, Dane Blake said, flipping hurriedly through his own papers. What's that? I haven't heard about that. That sounds important. Is that important? Desdemona Vance, the youngest member of the group, pulled a thick, filthy binder from a bag sitting beside her. Cracking it open, she leafed through the past the introductions to a spot a few pages in and began reading. We hold the following to be inescapable truths. Calvin held up his hand. I'll save you the trouble. This document was written by the first Delta Command at the behest of the engineer himself. If we take this document at its word, then you don't need to destroy the Foundation. You need to destroy the Overseers. Priscilla barked out another laugh, one that was not shared with her followers. Yes, of course. That will be so much easier. 13 immortal demigods that have no doubt lived long since buried themselves in spells and witchery. How simple. But Sylvester Stallone was still watching Calvin very closely. The 13 Overseers have assured immortality for the others, so as long as he sits on the council, you'd have to find him first. Well, you'd have to find all of them at some point, which would be itself impossible unless you had... His eyes narrowed. Unless you had the journal. Calvin nodded and reached into his pocket, inside of his chest of his jacket, produced a small blue leather-bound, partially wrapped book in brown paper. Holy shit, Kowalski said. Where'd you get that? Desdemona peered at it quizzically. What is it? Years ago, Kowalski said, we received a report that one of the Coalition's finest agents, some fellow with a weird codename, had been putting together a report about the Foundation's overseers, where they live, places they frequent, their habits, activities. In other words, if you wanted to find the overseers, it would be the perfect place to start. I still don't understand, Priscilla said. Don't we keep tabs on the overseers? We know where they are, don't we? Sylvester scoffed. No. We tell our agents we do, and every now and again we'll get some report of one of them passing through and somebody getting a glimpse of them. But if we really had to, we could probably come up with a real-time location of maybe half. A few more if we got lucky. He extended a crooked finger towards the journal. But those overseers aren't why that's important. It's important because it contains the location of 2 overseers, including the 13th, who have never been seen before, ever. Until that book was written, nobody was sure if they even existed. Kowalski was furiously rubbing his temples. Okay, slow down, let me think. He looked over the sheath of paper in his hands again. Alright, so say you can find them. That's great, and that's a good start. But there's more to it than that. The contract they've got with death. As long as they've got that contract, they can't die. That wasn't true when the Summa Modus Operandi was written, and that's why it's always been seen as more of a guideline than a hard and fast protocol, because you can't kill death. Calvin nodded. You're right. You can't kill death. I don't think you have to kill death, though. You just need to break the contract. Sylvester leaned forward, responding now with carefully chosen words. If you want to break the contract, you'd need to steal someone back from death. You'd need something that hasn't existed in 100 years. Calvin fished back into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial of clear liquid. He set it on the table with a pronounced thunk. If you could break the contract, then what? Whispers surrounded Calvin. He was suddenly aware of the presence of something great and terrible, something whose furious attention he had immediately gained. In the stillness of the warehouse, behind arcana and beneath the world above, the presence passed through, and then it was gone. Then, as they did so many times before, Delta dissolved into chaos. Holy shit, Calvin, what is that? The Foundation. The fountain was so dry, it doesn't matter, even if it knows. We have said too much already. It would become possible to destroy the 13 Foundation overs. It would be possible to fulfill the Summa Operandi. Kowalski had given up maintaining any kind of order to the stack of papers and laid them out idly around him. Where in the world did you come up with that? Calvin returned the vial to his pocket. When we were moving against the Foundation storehouse in Bangladesh, when I was told I was misappropriating insurgency resources, he glared at Kowalski out of the corner of his eye. This is what we were looking for. It wasn't there, granted, but this, he held up the vial to eye level. I found this the same way I found that journal. Luck. Sylvester nodded slowly. If that is what we all think it is, then I think you're right, Calvin. I think that would do. He stroked the handful of wiry hairs on his chin. Do they know you have that? Calvin hesitated. No. Desdemona leaned forward. So what's your plan? Calvin slid the journal forward and set the vial next to it. We find every single one of those rotten bastards using this. He pushed a finger down on the journal. Starting with the 13th and working forward. Once they're in the ground, the Foundation will be without governance and will fall apart. We sweep up the pieces, and with the overseers removed from this world, we can begin to heal. He leaned back. Someday down the line, we will all wake up one day in a world no longer under threat of the supernatural. A world free to choose its own destiny. I gotta say, I like the name Desdemona. Desdemona? A character... Oh, it's from Othello. So sweet. Kowalski continued to flip through the papers Calvin had stacked in front of him, more slowly this time. He paused on one passage and looked up. Alright, I'm convinced. Our resources are limited. If you wanted to attempt like this, 20 years ago, we might have had a better spot to help you. He drummed his fingers on the table. Of course, you didn't have the journal before now, which is really a game changer here. Kowalski turned towards his colleagues. Any of you in opposition to this? If we do this, we have to do it. There's no half-assing it. I'll be the first to admit we're wildly outmatched, but if what Calvin says is true, we've at least got surprise on our side, which counts for something. He nodded. All in favor? They all spoke in unison. Aye. Kowalski turned back to Calvin. What do you need? Now, present day. He asked for 3 individuals, specialized and experienced agents each. The logic was straightforward enough. The Foundation was a massive, inexorable machine. Moving that means of the insurgency against it would fail, as it did time and time before. The insurgency had never quite recovered from being shattered by the Foundation all those years ago, and the squabbling factions and schisms within the group were only barely held together by Delta. Trying to turn that disorder into action would be disastrous. But a group of 4, a group small enough to sneak past the all-seeing eye of the Foundation, might make it work. The insurgency had resources enough to create distractions where they were needed and reinforce the team if necessary, but Delta had made it very clear. Their reach had limits. If the group passed beyond Delta's ability to support them, they would be on their own. The first of them was Anthony Wright, a well-seasoned British agent of the insurgency in his 50s with a kill list nearly as long as his list of accolades. After Delta came into power, the insurgency had still only been a little more than a handful of groups of belligerent and chaotic idealists. But throughout their history, Anthony had been a voice of reason and direction. He had maintained the original goals of the insurgency and had been looked to for guidance for as long as anyone could remember. Whenever Delta had an opening, it was often thought he would take a seat on the table, but he had always refused the position. The second was a woman, younger slightly than Calvin, but not by much. Her name was Olivia Torres, and until a few years prior, she had been known within the anomalous community as the famed anarchist Ivory. Her installations were well known, especially in the 3 Portlands that she had called home, the Foundation long believed that she was active within AWCY circles and had pursued her relentlessly. When they finally closed in, she fled to the insurgency and had a fresh start there. The last was Adam Ivanov, which caught Delta by surprise. Adam was young and experienced and not a fighter. He was good with computers, a prodigy even, but was next to useless with a gun. Calvin, however, was adamant in his decision. He knew that about Adam before Adam had known about him, and he had a series of actions over the past several years that led Adam away from the Ukrainian specialist group he had been involved in into the waiting arms of the insurgency. Calvin had a history with Anthony and Olivia. He had trained with and fought alongside Anthony for the better half of the past decade, and Olivia had been assigned to him on a handful of raids before his exile. Both responded to his request eagerly. Adam, though, was hesitant. He had taken some convincing. Even still, Calvin could sense a desire in his heart. Adam had spent his youth a Foundation D class assigned to SCP-610 by virtue of his parents being Ukrainian political prisoners. A raid on a Foundation labor camp had liberated him from the horrors of his captivity, and Anthony had carried him away out of danger himself. When the young man heard that his savior was among those he would serve along, he quickly submitted the request. Thus, it was that scant 3 months later, their small ship wrestled against the waves towards a jagged black spear that pierced the stormy waters of the South Atlantic, looming with silent benevolence. Or malevolence? Whatever. I think it's... whatever. Calvin stood on the ship's prow as the tower came into view. He could feel the magnetics burning in his mind, and he could see the shimmering glow of the tower's anomalous nature. A scar, he thought. "What is it?" he heard Olivia say as she took his place beside him. "It's magic, right? A cognohazard, maybe." "No, not a cognohazard. It's an anti-meme. The Foundation didn't build this. Someone else did, a long time ago. Whatever they built, it wasn't there anymore, and so the Foundation had it repurposed." He laughed. "How do you escape a prison when you don't even realize you're in? Or, in our case, how do you find someone in something that isn't even on any map? That can't be on a map." Olivia shrugged. "I was wondering the same thing. How'd you find where it is?" Calvin produced a small blue journal. This was the personal journal of someone who had studied the overseers and their methods for decades. He flipped it over and back. It sat in a box for years before someone realized what it was. When Skidder Marshall picked it up, he realized he'd struck cold. "So how much it cost?" Calvin shrugged. "Nothing. I stole it." Olivia nodded and looked back towards the tower. "It's beautiful in a way. Otherworldly." "It is." A wave smashed against the side of the ship, surging up in front of them in a blanket of freezing sea foam. Calvin instinctually reached to shield her. Olivia stepped back, but gave him a smile. The muted whine of the foghorn rose up behind them. Calvin turned and hurled himself up the stairs of the wheelhouse. There, Anthony Wright gruffingly tugged at the wheel, in between taking long, hard puffs from a fat stogie that dangled by the side of his mouth. "This is stupid, Calvin," Anthony said, furiously chomping on the cigar. What's British? "There's nowhere to land. I haven't been on a ship in 16 years. What's your plan?" Calvin squinted at the tower. Their magnetics would only last so long. Afterwards, they wouldn't even be able to perceive the tower. This had to be quick, and the seas were not helping. "The entrance is above." Calvin pointed towards an opening in the rocky face. "Think you can get us up there?" Anthony looked at him like he was mad. "I'll get something up there. I hope you don't need the boat afterwards." Calvin slapped him on the back and grinned. "There's always more boats." Anthony rolled his eyes and spun the wheel, bringing their ship around. "The next swell, we're going to gun it. Tell them to hold this thing down, because the only way we're getting this done is by wrecking the boat. You got that, right? This'll wreck the boat." Calvin nodded. "All right, then. Let's wreck the boat." Calvin scurried down the stairs to find the others. Olivia and Adam were in the stairway. Adam looked ready to vomit. He grabbed them both and pulled them towards the galley, shoving them towards a pillar. "Stand here and hold on." He turned to go back up, just as the ship slammed into a massive wave with the force of a thunderclap. The whole vessel lurched down, up, forward. For one instant, Calvin could feel his gut squeezing up out of his throat. Behind his clenched teeth. By the time he reached the top of the stairs, the ship's hull was screeching, iron and wood grinding against a harsh, merciless stone. The hull went on to make several undignified cracks and pops, then came to a stop. Calvin stumbled onto the deck. The boat was now fully docked inside the tower's entrance. Behind them, the ocean continued to rage. Adam was the first to crawl out behind Calvin, but only so he could heave the contents of his stomach over the rails. Anthony, who had by some miracle remained mostly dry, walked down past Calvin and unlatched the anchor and threw it over the side. It made a dull metallic thud as it slammed into dry rock. "Land ho!" he announced. Adam wiped spittle away from his mouth and back on his sleeve. "Madness. You're mad. This is madness. I can bear... This whole place is making me dizzy." He tried to I'm not doing a Russian accent, by the way. He tried to stand, stumbling backwards. You old people, you're on your way out. I've got the whole life ahead of me, and you crashed us into the side of a mountain. Very considerate." He turned back to the railing and heaved again. Calvin patted Adam on the back. "Patience, Adam. You stay here with Olivia and Anthony. I'll go alone." He looked to Anthony. "Make sure no one follows me." Anthony nodded. "Remember what I told you. Don't trust a word. They'll say anything. Lie through their teeth. Be careful." Calvin reassured the old man with a clap on the shoulder. "I will. I'll need you, all of you, very soon. But this part, I can handle this alone." Calvin leapt over the railing and down to the stone below. The entryway narrowed into a tunnel. He followed the passage into the darkness ahead. It ended at a freight elevator around 40 meters. He could hear the distant roar of the ocean echoing off the smooth stone walls. In the dim light, Calvin could barely make out deep cuts in the stone, almost like lacerations. He pulled the iron railing open, stepping inside and hitting a button. Just before it started down, it occurred to him that the entrance looked like it had been smashed into the tower, rather than a cut. He could not say how long the descent took. After a few minutes, the smooth metal of the shaft gave way to rock. The elevator's interior grew cold. He could make out the faint sound of something beating below. Calvin reached into his pocket and touched the vial, reassuring that it was still there. The elevator stopped. The carriage shuddered, and, with a groan, the gate slid open. He had arrived at a massive chamber lit by torches, each burning with smokeless emerald flame. The walls were carved with ancient runes that spiraled up into a hawing darkness. The same darkness yawned before his feet. Nothing stood between it and him, save for the elevator and the steel-segmented walkway extending out from it. The walkway reached the center of the chamber. There, a column of stone rose out of the pit. When Calvin took a step towards it, a pebble glanced off the side of his boot and fell below. He waited to hear it land. 2 minutes later, he stopped waiting. He crossed the chasm across the walkway. His footfalls were the only sound he heard, save one, the soft beating that came from below. As he drew close to the dais, he could make out its solitary occupant. Seated on a small, plain metal folding chair, bound to it by thin gold chains, was a human corpse. Calvin opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by a sound. It was like a stale rattle, a horrid, empty noise. It filled the room like a chorus, echoing off the walls. It was laughter, mocking laughter. He approached the corpse, examining it. Hollow, rotted sockets were all that remained of its eyes. Despite this, it looked at him with a fierce intensity. He felt the familiar chill again. Suddenly, the beating below stopped. "A visitor." The corpse's mouth did not move. Nevertheless, a voice creeped out of the draft, like a draft through a tomb. "How peculiar. I don't often receive guests." Calvin hesitated. "You're 0513, correct?" That wretched laughter spilled out again. "In a sense, this body was once that of Dr. Felix Carter, the meddler. He was the 13th. I reside here, in his place." Calvin nodded. "So, yes then. Good. You will commune with me. I have come to renegotiate your contract." Something flashed across his vision. He saw an endless field of corpses, fire and blood. He saw a parade of red horrors, a silent figure watching from above. Calvin shook his head and turned away. When he turned back, it was almost like the corpse was smiling. "You have no authority here, Calvin Lucen." Calvin stepped back in shock. "Yes, I know your name. Yours is not one of the 13 pinned on the contract. Your hand cannot break it." Calvin collected his nerves. "You're right, it's not. But humor me, if you would. Your contract, what are its terms? What were you promised?" Something inside the corpse, something growled. "Fine. No harm in humoring the soon-to-be dead. The contract offered an escape for the 13 from the hands of fate. Life everlasting." "They already had the Fountain of Youth. Why did they need you?" "The fountain had run dry. Even then, it could not save them from me, only keep me at arm's length. When you began to die, the first came to me to bargain. I offered to stay my hand in exchange for a seat at the table." The rotted voice laughed again. "It was a simple negotiation." Calvin walked behind the corpse. His eyes traced the sigils along the wall that surrounded them. "And, as part of the contract, they gave you this man, gave you his life?" "No, his life was insured as part of the contract. They gave me his body. He lingers on the top of death eternally. His mind is given to the sublime ecstasy of near death." Calvin cocked his head sideways. "He's not dead?" The corpse scoffed. "No." Calvin pulled from the vial in his pocket and pulled on the cork. "Good. Drink up, you crusty old bitch." He reached out from behind the corpse, seized it by the chin, and with a squeeze, he forced the mouth open. With his other hand, he emptied the contents of the vial into the pit of its throat, taking care to ensure not a drop was wasted. When the vial was empty, he released its face and stepped in front of it. "What was that?" its voice hissed. "Where did you get that from? How did—" The change was immediate. Color rushed back into the corpse's face. Blood surged through its body. A fresh pink tissue filled the gaps where its skin had flaked away. Glistening knobs of white swelled into its sockets. The emancipated torso spasmed, then expanded. The corpse lurched upward as it took its gasping, choked breath. A violent, painful cough spasmed, forced ages of collected dust to evacuate its lungs. Its arms lunged down to grab its chair. In the span of only a minute, the corpse had become a nude man. The convulsions began to settle. His eyes, hazel gold, now filled with fear, darted back and forth. "What have you done?" he shrieked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What have you done?" Something dark and silver began to seep out of the man's eyes, nose, and mouth. It was like smoke, but thicker. It shimmered in the air above him like a cloud. His eyes rolled back towards the shape. He cried out like a panicked animal. "No! No, don't leave me! Don't leave me! Don't!" Calvin leveled his gun at the man and squeezed the trigger. He buried one slug in his temple and another in his heart. Dr. Felix Carter jerked away with a final gasp. His body slumped into the chair. His head fell back. He stared into darkness above. Calvin grabbed the back of the metal folding chair and dragged it to the edge of the dais. With a firm shove of his foot, he pushed the chair, along with its occupant, into the pit below. There was a brief clatter of chains, then nothing. Calvin felt the presence again. When he turned, he found a silver woman draped in darkness standing alongside him. She peered into the abyss. Her eyes looked sad. "The living body of the 13th, she said. "The contract is invalid. I am released from my obligation." Calvin swallowed and nodded. "Should fatal peril come to them, you will no longer stay your hand against the other 12? "I will not." She did not look away from the pit. "They are free to die." Calvin sighed. "Good. That is enough." He turned to the elevator, taking a step. Something made him pause. He looked back towards the pale figure struggling with a question he wanted to ask. "Why didn't you stop me? You have the power and authority to do so. Why'd you stand by and do nothing?" At last she turned and regarded Calvin. Calvin felt an overwhelming swell of solitude, of melancholy rush through him. "Something festers at the heart of the council, something that will not die. I thought that, Perhaps, if I had a seat at their table, I could find it and make it die. But I couldn't. There are things in this world beyond my reach, Calvin Lucen. She turned back towards the pit. Perhaps you will fare better. Perhaps not. Delta Command sent another ship to fetch them. Shortly after they boarded, Calvin was approached by Desdemona, who handed him a briefing. "Did you have any trouble?" she asked. Calvin shook his head. "Getting here, getting in." He looked back to where the tower had been. "I can't even see it anymore. Like it was never there, and yet..." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the journal. This guy knew about it decades ago. The young woman laughed. "Yes, well, I'm sure your mystery agent had ways of his own. Just like we need you to have yours. All of our plans are in motion now, Calvin. They all rest on your performing your duty." She nodded in the direction of the absent tower. "With any luck, the rest of them will be as simple as this." Calvin laughed and shook his head. "That's unlikely. But we got good first lick in while they weren't looking. But I doubt there'll be any surprise next time." So that was the story of how the 13th died. And now it's on to step 0112. Oh wait, I've got to read a journal entry too. God, there's so much reading. This is a journal entry of the 13th. To the reader, salutations, I have blank things, and I have a well-traveled and blank member of a certain secret blank to work on documenting blank population from the strange blank things that inhabit this world. In my many travels, I have seen great many horrors and wonders, and none are perhaps so great and terrible than those individuals that call themselves the overseers of the SCP Foundation. Those individuals, who were once men and women themselves, have long since abandoned their humanity for the purpose of a pure-minded dedication to a single idea, the study and control of anomalous interactions in the universe. The amount of power they hold is staggering, and in many cases they can be seen more fearsome. I believe that the entities they contain. To this end, I have dedicated my life to their study, tracking them, and understanding them. This journal is the sum of my research. Oh, no. It is, it's a journal entry. It's not a journal entry of 0513. This is the journal itself, the blue journal that Calvin Lucen keeps referring to. This journal is the sum of my research, documenting the strange and unusual characteristics of these fearsome people. I cannot say that what you may intend to use this information for, but I hope you find it useful. All the best, L. The 13th Overseer. The story of the Overseer's rise to power begins with the individual known as the Other Overseer. Certain occult groups talk about him as if he was some sort of demon, and based on the information available to me, it is hard to deny their reasoning. As the story is told, the Overseer once had access to the Fountain of Youth, a spring of water that could heal ailments and restore life, so long as he drank from it. Despite this, they found the limitations of this process stifling. They could drink and be young forever, but they were still subject to death by any number of other means. The Overseers, determined to maintain their legacy perpetually, decided to conduct an occult ritual of their own, one that had been taught to them by the long-since diminished children of the Endless Waste. By bringing a person to the very brink of death and keeping them there, they would be able to summon death itself, who, no doubt seeking to collect the soul, would appear to finish the job itself. It was decided that this would fall onto the 13th Overseer, a man named Felix Carter, who prior to his involvement in the Foundation had been a physicist of some renown in certain circles. It's likely that Dr. Carter, of whom little record now exists, was among the first individuals contracted by the person who would later be known as the Administrator, when the Foundation was first in its infancy. By all accounts, the ritual was performed successfully, and the Avatar of Death appeared before the council to bargain for the man's soul. Instead, the first Overseer proposed a deal: the life of Dr. Carter and his seat on the council in exchange for a stay of mortality for the rest of the members. The extent of these negotiations is unknown, but it is believed that the overseers were successful in convincing Death to agree to their terms. In order to preserve Dr. Carter's body and protect the structure of their contract, the overseers had to find somewhere in the world to keep it, where it could never be found by any other person ever again. I cannot say for certain where Dr. Carter's body is today. However, it is known that there is a location in the South Atlantic, in the cold and dangerous waters near the Central Islands, where sailors have periodically reported feeling a strange presence, something they could not identify and could not see, something that seemed to impair their very ability to perceive at all. This phenomenon I know well. The sailors, I believe, were suffering from an exposure to a particularly potent anti-meme, something that humans are not capable of perceiving. It is rumored in some circles that in the days long past there existed a number of structures around the world that, possibly due to some calamity, were abandoned by their builders and were suddenly and quietly snuffed out. These structures, it is said, would have been capable of sustaining similar powerful anti-memes. If the structure would exist, I believe it very may well, it would be only possible for a human to perceive it under the influence of a drug called Nestic, a powerful psychoactive medicine that alters the way human brain processes information. Unfortunately, for all those who might be seeking out Dr. Carter's resting place, the entire supply of Nestic the world over is controlled by the very Foundation who put him there. This, I believe, can be no coincidence. One last point of interest. There was a study conducted years ago by the Coalition to see if they could replicate the effects of Nestic using non-anomalous substances. Nearly all the trials failed, but one showed promise. Dark rum, if exposed to sea air, was a very mild Nestic property. This study was cancelled, and attempts to replicate the results were unsuccessful. If it were me, I might have considered combining the alcohol with laudanum, which has been known to exacerbate the effects of certain hallucinogens. However, it is perhaps for this reason that there are stories of sailors describing a towering black spire carved out of the pillars of pandemonium itself appearing to them briefly as their ships were thrashed by the uncaring seas. Or it could be nothing. To date, there are no records of any sightings of Dr. Carter since the day he was supposedly given up in exchange for life everlasting. If he could still exist somewhere in this world, I imagine an unknowable, unperceptible prison deep in the world's roughest oceans would be the exact place he might be. Should one encounter the Overseer and the Avatar of Death, it should go without saying extreme caution would be advised. No living man can say how far the grip of death extends. That is the journal entry for the first journal entry. Now, we are on to Overseer 12. Step 001/12. I also find it interesting we still don't know what 001 is besides this plan to kill the Overseers. 0512, the accountant. Previous name unknown, African male, appears to be in his 40s, well-known figure in financial markets, though rarely spoken of publicly if ever. Dresses in expensive tailored clothing with a similar expensive jewelry. Wears dark glasses. Apparent mathematical genius, supposedly capable of running the calculations for probability itself in his mind. Likely anomalous influence. Maintains financial records. Manipulates trade markets in order to accrue wealth for the Foundation and, by extension, himself. Supposedly has members of his own staff seated at high positions on financial boards of all major world governments. My throat's starting to hurt. Chapter 2. Futures Trading. Elsewhere. In a room devoid of light or sound, a man sat at his desk and read. There was a time when the darkness would have impeded him, but that time has passed. Now he found it comforting. Colors distracted him from his work. He turned to the next page of the report. Despite not needing to see the words to read them, old habits, he supposed. With each successive sentence, his calm gave way to a cold, calculated purpose. The door opened. A blade of light pierced the room, illuminating the man and his desk. It cut across his forearm and highlighted an old burn scar. He instinctually moved his hand out to cover it. He looked up. A woman stood at the doorway, hesitating. It was only then he realized his face was twisted with rage. He forced himself to relax, acknowledged her with a nod, and motioned her in. She took 2 steps and spoke. "You've heard?" "Yes." He closed the report. "Do we know who yet?" "Not yet." She moved to approach, but stopped, as if a wind forced her back. "Whoever found the pinnacle did so with the use of Nestic, and there's a limited supply. We're looking." "And the contract?" The woman didn't respond. He sighed. "Felix?" "We didn't find him. If he fell or was pushed, he might still be falling. We have to assume the worst." The man stood, his eyes fixed on the backs of his own knuckles. "I don't understand how this could happen. I don't understand who would do this. Who could do this. Do they even know what they did?" He looked at her. "This is bad." Her expression did not change. "The rest of the council has been alerted. I just came here to make sure that you knew." She took another step forward. Her hand fell on his desk. Maybe if we just... Whatever you're about to say, don't." His voice was flat. Something trembled just beneath the surface. "Whoever they are, they got lucky." She frowned. He could see the weariness in her face. There was something she wanted to tell him. There was something she wanted to say. Instead, she just closed her eyes and nodded. He reached for her hand upon the desk, taking it in his own. His palm was like a worn, scraped leather. Hers was ice. "I know you're tired. I know, God, I know. He forced himself to stop. He took a breath, turned her hand over, and traced the scars along her wrist and forearm. She looked so frail now. "We can't stop now. We can't give up now." Her eyes closed. "I know." "Go on now. Go back to the garden. You know the way in. You'll be safe there. I'm going to call up the task forces, and we'll figure out what this is. I'll call you when it's clear." She squeezed his hand back. At last her eyes opened. "What about you?" He smiled. "I just need to figure some things out, and then I'll come for you." He came around the desk and held her. She held him back. After a few moments of silence, she turned her head up to his. The phone rang. He grimaced. His grip loosened on her. "I'm sorry, Her expression hardened. She released him, nodding. "I know." Without another word, she turned and left him alone. He reached for the phone. "The accountant!" Anthony found the title amusing. "Do they only have one?" Olivia laughed. "That's a lot of math. You must be some sort of uber nerd." "A dire nerd," Adam offered, his eyes never leaving the screen of his laptop. This comment drew blanks from stares of Olivia, Anthony, and Calvin. "You know, like a dire wolf from D&D or Game of Thrones," or Adam looked up. He immediately scowled and then went back to typing. "Fuck, you people are old." Anthony took a drag of his cigarette and eyed Calvin from across the room. "All right, so you're planning on finding all these fucks? I doubt they're just hanging out in some local pub. They're probably holed up somewhere with enough anomalous ordinances to make Mordor look like the Shire." He gave Adam a look who, without raising his head, held up 2 fingers in appreciation. Calvin nodded. "Yeah, this is where it gets tricky. Our mystery agent wrote a lot about the Overseers, and a little bit about where they live, or where they might be hiding, but a lot about is situational and might not be helpful. That's why we're going after the accountant first. He's the one who pays the rent. Take him out, and the list of possible safe houses gets much smaller." Olivia leaned back in her chair. "Perfect. We just have to find this one, then. The first one of these gods on Earth that know we're coming for them. Do you have a plan?" Calvin gestured to his right. "I've got Adam." Adam leaned away from his computer. "Oh, yeah, right, yeah, I can find him." Anthony snorted. "This'll be good." Anthony ignored him. "The accountant is, as far as we know, a mathematical prodigy who specializes in statistical analysis. He's a data sponge. He soaks up information, analyzes it, and finds hidden correlations no one else would have seen. Everything he does based on invisible relationships. His entire route, What he wears, what he drinks, his day-to-day activities, they're all based on predictions derived from these correlations. He turned his screen around to show the others. Several tabs were open in his browser, the current one a graph of the current stock prices. Now, I probably don't need to tell a person like this could do the stock markets. He analyzes data faster than computers. He can predict the boom and bust of Fortune 500 based on a goddamn train schedule. And though his ability to see these correlations is anomalous, the correlations themselves aren't. They're just impossible for anyone else to understand or decode. All right? Anthony said. I think that's Australian. I don't know. I do not do good at accents. All right, Anthony said. But that doesn't tell us how to train schedules. Olivia cut him off. She was focused on one of the unopened tabs on the screen. In Tokyo? Adam grinned and nodded. He opened the tab, revealing a translated train schedule. The journal mentioned it. I've been having Alexander crunching the numbers for a few weeks. Alexander? Anthony narrowed his eyes. It's the name he gave to his laptop, Calvin replied. What'd you find? Basically, there's some sort of weird correlation between international housing markets and the train schedules printed in Tokyo on the 5th day of every 3rd month, Adam said. And based on how deliberate this guy is, I'm willing to bet money he goes to Tokyo himself to analyze those schedules the day they're printed. Hang on. Olivia leaned in to examine the screen closer. You said this guy is able to make predictions based on the correlations no one else can see, right? Wouldn't that lead him to realize he shouldn't be where we expect him to be? Adam cocked his head. Are you asking me if he can see into the future? Well, yeah, isn't that basically what this is? Olivia turned the screen and focused her attention on Adam. If he's able to magically see correlations no one else can, isn't it possible some piece of information he's encountered will tell us that we're coming, or even who we are? I don't think so, Calvin said. I mean, the numbers can be wrong. Adam shook his head. No, mostly right. The numbers can't be wrong. They're just data. He can't know anything for sure, though. He just makes predictions, and those predictions have varying degrees of certainty. That's the hiccup. Here, he can know there's a 75% chance that today someone will attack him. He can know that there's a 30% chance it'll be 5 people, and a 25% chance it'll be 4 people, and a 20% chance it'll be 3 people, and so on. Anthony massaged his brows. Look, do we really need to take probabilities course to kill this guy? I bet he's smart, but last time I checked, chain schedules don't stop bullets. But bullets won't stop someone who isn't even there, Olivia replied. She turned back to Adam. So basically he can predict extremely complex systems based on seemingly random bits of data, right? Adam nodded. Right. Olivia gave him a very crooked grin. In that case, I think I know exactly how to beat him. I think I need to... Oh my god. Yeah, I'm gonna need to split this up into like 6 different parts because this is so long. God. Man, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm just a slow reader, but my computer really can't handle like a lot of recording. So I think I'm gonna read 305 stories at a time, and then because that will make it about an hour and a half each. Also, I don't think anyone will watch a video that's over an hour and a half, because no one watches the videos anyway. And then I'll summarize it at the end. That's mostly for me, by the way. The black car pulled to the side of the street in Tokyo Financial District. The man who stepped out was so extraordinarily unremarkable that, if under normal circumstances, even his lack of remarkability failed to generate a remark. His high-end tailored suit and dark glasses blended in with the so well-to-do of the region. His skin was a shade of amber gold. Despite being aware of the time, he checked his wristwatch, closed the car door, took 3 steps down to the sidewalk. The vehicle drove away. The accountant was a man of precision. He slept for exactly 7 hours. When he woke up, it was on the hour. Each footfall was calculated, each step predetermined. He made no mistakes, no chances, and accounted for every significant possibility. That's why, when he first noticed young men approaching him from across the street, he took an immediate action. The man was in his 20s, short hair, open coat, Slavic, if you were to wager a guess. Based on the color of the man's shoes, the accountant determined that he was here to kill him. Based on the current market price of peaches, the accountant determined he was not alone. He took a step to the left. A crowd of businessmen had just emerged from a nearby diner. This put at least 15 people between him and the would-be assassin. One of the 15 was Japanese, in his mid-50s. He walked with a slight limp and was going bald. This meant the second assassin was in the third-story window on the small wine shop across the street. The accountant adjusted his watch, reflecting the sunlight off its surface and into the window. The sniper was briefly blinded. Now neither the assassin could see him. He moved to enter a nearby office building. "Fuck, glare," Anthony growled into his mic. "You see him?" Anthony fought his way through the crowd, shaking his head. "No, lost him. He's anticipating everything we're doing, I think. He's got to be in that building with the blue glass. Heading for it." Olivia peeked from around a corner and touched her earpiece. "Calvin, should I go in after him?" There was a brief pause before Calvin responded. "Yes." Olivia jogged towards the financial building. Adam pushed his way through several more people and followed her. The interior was a sprawling 3-story lobby with framed marble. The grand staircase extended up to each level, with a glass elevator that provided an alternate route. Adam's eyes darted between the various levels. "Which level?" asked Adam. She yanked Adam by the arm and pulled. "Neither. This way." The two of them took off towards the far end of the building. An emergency exit led to an alleyway out back. Olivia shoved the door open and stepped through. Adam followed. As soon as they stepped outside, they were greeted with the sound of muffled gunfire. "Shit!" Olivia shoved Adam between two dumpsters, and she soon followed, dropping to a crouch. She flipped out her compact mirror and held it out, using the reflection to search the alley behind. 2 men in suits stood where the alley emptied onto the street. Between them, the accountant checked his watch. "This will do," he announced. "We've got about a minute before I leave to catch my train. So, what can I do for you?" Olivia examined the reflection in a mirror. Adam squinted at the image, frowning. "He's just standing out in the open," he whispered. "Could we just—" She touched her earpiece again. "Calvin, do we go for it?" Calvin's response came almost immediately. "No." Olivia looked at Adam. "Keep him talking." Adam nodded. He turned to the side of the dumpster and hollowed, "You're the accountant, right?" "You know, I do have the professional title. And a name, if you'd rather." "We know who you are," Adam yelled back. "We're here to kill you." "Yes, I'm aware." "Well, here I am. Go ahead. Take a shot." Olivia gestured for Adam to keep going. "Uh-huh. But do you know why we're here to kill you?" 29 seconds. "You're very likely the ones I've received word about just this morning. You're responsible for terminating our contract with death. I presume you want to murder me over some ideological squabble." "An ideological squabble?" Adam's voice nearly hitched up an octave. Olivia reached to touch his shoulder. "Do you know how many corpses your organization is built on top of? How many people die every day just so you fucks get to run the show?" "I've never killed anyone." "Of course, I'm certain you've killed a few. How many? A dozen? 100? Did you bother to learn any of their names?" the accountant asked. He checked his watch again. "Were any of them children? Just curious." Adam jerked away from Olivia's grasp. She squeezed him hard. "Don't," she whispered. "He's trying to get a rise out of you." "Fuck him," Adam growled. His grip on his pistol was tight enough to force the blood out of his knuckles. "Like he hasn't killed." Well, if you're going to try and murder me, I suppose I'll just have to leave early," the accountant said. Again, he looked at his watch. 7 seconds. "We're going to miss our chance," Adam hissed. "I'm going to—" "No," Calvin said. Adam was already lunging to his feet, and Olivia was lunging to tackle him. Her arm slammed into his legs, forcing him to buckle. In the next instant, a deafening pop rushed out to fill the alleyway. A fist-sized crater appeared in the dumpster behind him, right where Adam's head had been. Wisps of smoke whirled up from the hole. Adam and Olivia both stared at it, their backs pressed against the other dumpster. "Shit," whispered Adam. "Sniper," Olivia replied. "One," the accountant announced. "Everyone down." Several more pops echoed throughout the street, accompanied with distant screams. Olivia and Adam caught the sound of glass shattering. The popping sounds were followed by additional gunfire. Anthony's voice boomed over the earpiece. "I'm covering you. Go!" Olivia and Adam ran for the door. In the distance, they could hear the sirens, along with the squealing rubber of the accountant's car as it drove away. Sometimes the accountant wondered what it was like to live in uncertainty, to exist in a world where you could not predict the most likely outcome based on the data in front of you. He imagined it was a dreadful, unbearable state, like being trapped in a nightmare where nothing made any sense. The thought often prompted him to feel tremendous pity. He felt no pity at this moment. He approached the boarding station. He checked his watch and revisited the alley in his mind. He had replayed the events that unfolded there 23 times. Each time, none of it made sense. None of it fit the model. He correctly predicted the arrival of the two assassins. He also correctly predicted the arrival of their comrade, but his model had shown that, by standing out in the open and addressing them, there was an overwhelming likelihood that at least one of them would emerge and immediately struck down by his stationed sniper. Nothing was truly certain, he knew. Every rule had its exception. Every absolute hid a sliver of doubt. Everything he understood was merely an approximation of something he did not. But the chance both snipers emerged from this conflict unscathed were, by his calculations, comparable to the magnitude that a tornado arranged a house of cards, then back in the same ordered deck. It was beyond unlikely. It was nothing short of miraculous. Was that what he had witnessed? A miracle of probability? An event so rare and near impossible as the emergence of life itself? He stepped onto the train, providing his ticket. He moved to one of the private rooms, sliding the door aside, taking a seat. As the city began to slip past, he ran through the model 24th time, then decided he would simply need to let it go. The sliding door rattled open. A not quite middle-aged man with dark, faintly graying hair stepped in, taking an opposite seat. He casually reached into the coat pocket and pulled a revolver, aiming it squarely at the accountant's heart. The accountant stared uncomprehendingly. This was impossible. This could not be possible. 2 miracles in one day. How? He croaked. Calvin reached into his pocket with his other hand, and withdrawing a small, unremarkable coin, he perched it at the top of his thumb and proceeded to flip it before snatching it out of the air. He then showed it to the accountant. Tails. The gears in his head started to turn. You're good at predicting complicated systems, Calvin said, but only when they behave the way they're supposed to. You can't predict them all if their decisions are entirely unpredictable. How did you know I would be? We overheard you say you had a train to catch. There are 2 train stations nearby, so I flipped a coin. The accountant closed his eyes and smiled. How utterly boorish. You got lucky. Yeah, but it worked, didn't it? So it did. His eyes opened. He focused his gaze on Calvin. Well, you got me here. What do you want? Calvin laid a piece of paper in front of him and pulled out a pen. He slid it across the table between them towards the accountant. Names, locations, all of the rest of them. The accountant sighed. You want me to give up the names and locations of the other overseers. What? Do you want their PIN numbers too? Calvin tapped the revolver on the table. This isn't the time to get smart. The accountant sat back in his chair and loosened his tie. I'm not going to do that. You used a funny trick to put me in a compromising position, and that's clever. But now that we're here, I know exactly how this plays out. Why would I compromise my associates when you're going to kill me either way? Calvin shrugged. There's a difference between being shot and being dragged behind this train. The other man swallowed. That's barbaric. And either way, it's not particularly likely. We're not too far from our destination. There would be too many people around. The way I die is at the end of that gun. That doesn't bother you? The accountant rolled his tongue across his teeth. Of course it does. I haven't thought about the idea of dying in such a long time, and now to have it sitting here looking at it, It's nothing short of horrifying. But I'm not going to beg you for mercy from a terrorist. He leaned forward. Do you truly understand what it is you're doing? Calvin didn't answer. The overseer sighed. Go ahead. You both know what you're going to do next. Calvin squeezed the trigger. Step 00112, journal entry. The 12th overseer. No, 12th is spelt with an T and not a V. Learn something new every day. I actually didn't know that. It's an F. I'm sorry. It's spelled Twelfth. I always spelled it with a V. The 12th overseer, often called the accountant, is one of the more interesting personalities on the council. His position on the council was previously held by an unnamed individual who died sometime prior to the signing of their contract with death. After the previous 0512 died, the position was filled almost immediately, leading some to believe that the previous 0512 didn't die and was more killed, likely to make room for the current 0512's remarkable abilities. 0512, named Omar Yulwe, was, in the earliest record I have found, is nothing short of the world's premier mathematical prodigy. He was born in a small village in Uganda, but quickly designated himself for his remarkable gifts. It is thought by many of my sources that his ability to mentally perform complex abstract arithmetic math is anomalous, and while that is likely a near certainty, there is no definite proof. The overseer has purportedly employed by a small Ugandan accounting firm in his youth, where he quickly gained a reputation for his ability to perform calculations faster than any calculator. How he was approached by the Foundation and what was offered to him is unknown, but the man named Omar died in 1966, and it was shortly thereafter the new overseer took his place on the council. What is perhaps the most unique about the overseer and his ability to perform the calculations required to accurately predict the outcome of seemingly random probability to a nearly flawless degree? Rumors about this ability that truly led the Foundation to dominance, and he was able to accurately predict, by close observation and analysis of market trends, the rise and fall of powerful nations, as well as the actions of other potentially hostile groups. One source indicated that they believed it was him who first proposed the creation of the Omega 5-7 task force in order to later discredit General Bowie and allow the Americans to usurp his position on the U.S. government Security Council. However, calling his ability omniscient is not accurate. While the overseer can accurately predict the outcome of events that are affected by other events, it is likely that he does not know as well when presented with scenarios that do not have large enough datasets. In other words, he is easily capable of determining the outcome of events with many inputs, but he has some trouble with isolated incidents, such as guessing a number one person might be thinking. He's not a mind reader by any stretch of the imagination, even if he seems like one. As for his behavior, the 12th Overseer is a reclusive individual and does not eagerly seek out gatherings of people unlike some of his colleagues. I was on assignment once undercover at an event where there were several speakers talking about global market trends and projections. There was one individual I noticed who looked remarkably uncomfortable being there, and as if he was not my target, I did not interact with him beyond a friendly smile in passing, which he did not respond. It was not until later I had learned that this man was the accountant. Despite this, he does not seem to generally appear in highly populated areas, typically because those areas tend to correspond with active markets such as New York, London, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. Based on my observation, he generally travels with a small group of armed guards, though I have on several occasions witnessed him traveling alone. I can presume that his routine is not far behind. Or retinue? I don't know. The accountant will be a devilishly difficult person to corner and practically impossible once he knows you're looking for him. If he is aware of your intentions, he will quickly disappear, as was the case when I tried trailing him back into a safe house in Berlin. Shortly afterwards, I was pursued by his guards until I was out of the city, and I have not seen the man since. If you choose to try to ascertain the location of or apprehend the accountant, you must take him by surprise. Otherwise, he will not only be able to outthink you, but he will outplay you as well. The Foundation may keep him around, sour personality and all, to move their money around, but he is no less a dangerous individual than anyone else listed on this document. One last thing, whether it be helpful or not, one of my sources believes he sets his entire routine based on a local train schedule, as that is his favorite way to travel. Worth considering either way. L. I want to go over the story so far. So far in the Ouroboros, we've had 3 different SCP-001s. A collection of 9 children that can destroy anything quantumly. A broken god that destroyed half of Mexico, and a man-shaped black hole that could destroy the fabric of reality, all in different timelines, all with different O5 groups. And now finally, what we have here is a plot by the Chaos Insurgency to finally kill all the Overseers. I just need to remind myself because it gets to be a lot, because this is already like, what, 3 hours long over the course of a couple days, I think 2 days. Whatever. Let's continue. 3. Step 00111. 0511. The Liar. Date of birth unknown. Unknown descent. Unknown origin. Unknown gender. Infinitely difficult to identify. Single identifying mark is a small scar on left temple, usually hidden by hair. Generally appears as a wealthy woman in lavish outfits. Primarily disinformation entity within the Foundation. Oversees teams that maintain cover stories, amnestic supplies. Supposed connection with the gargantuan aquatic entity in the Bay of Bengal, which is SCP-3000, I think. Possible reality-bending properties, extremely dangerous. Notably, no records seem to exist of the appointment of 0511, unlike all members, who were either chosen by 051 or voted onto the council after the death and non-recovery of one of their colleagues. 0511 seems to have simply appeared on the council one day. Here's the story. Chapter 3, The Grand Illusion. Then, this. The man at the front of the room said, revealing a slide covered in many colored dots, is the universe. Everything that has ever been, or will ever be, that we can reach, is on this slide. So far as we know, that is it. The entire sum of existence. He turned off the projector, and for a moment the room was dark. When the light came back on, the image was a painting of Earth, as if taken from above and far away. This is us, obviously, the man said, centering his slide. Nearly every living thing we are aware of has been born and died on this rock. He paused for effect. Not such bad real estate, really. He adjusted the slide again, and the audience attempted meager laughter. And this is an atom, or at least a representation of one. Technology hasn't caught up yet, so we can see these little guys, but we've got a pretty good idea of what they might look like. Now, the atom is a building block, the very most basic particle in the element, in the universe. Or rather, it might be. There may be particles even smaller than that, and smaller particles that compose those. It's difficult to say where this ends, but at the bottom of this, there can be something fundamental, right? Something that doesn't just comprise the other building blocks, but necessitates their being. That's what we are searching for. The light came back up, and the man turned around. His white jacket bore the name Felix Carter, Ph.D. in blue lettering. If you've forgotten, that's 0513. His round glasses sat perched atop a red nose, and his gray hair was combed neatly to the side. We are approaching the International Academy of Existential Sciences. When we were approached the Academy of Existential Sciences, we came with a single goal: discovering the reason of why. We weren't asked to provide an explanation or to deduce why the reason why. Our task was to find the part of the universe that determines why we are what we are. Today, I'm happy to announce we have done this. He extended his arm and another man came into view. This man was tall, with cropped brown hair and a black jacket. He waved and smiled politely at the enthusiastic applause and stood with his hands clasped in front of him as he was introduced. This is Dr. Frederick Williams of the Royal Scientific Conservatory. It is with his assistance and financial backing that we have made this breakthrough discovery. The two of them paused as the lights dimmed again, and the projector above produced an image. The image was faint and full of static, but the focal point was clear, a single white line extending across the image, fading at both ends. What you see here is a thread, Dr. Carter continued. We only just started calling them that. We have no idea what they would look like when we started. We were able to find this thread to manifest itself using a series of high-energy pulses directed at a tiny piece of the Ozymandium film. This method was borrowed by Dr. Adam Bright and his team in the United States, who have been working on a similar project in the hopes of eliciting what they're calling trachyons, the fundamental building block of time, as it were. We discovered that by tuning our equipment just so, we were able to make out something that shouldn't happen. The image changed. On the next slide, a nearby structure is seen being pulled dramatically towards the center of the thread. On the next, the thread is gone and the building completely crumbled and misshapen. This is what we witnessed. By causing one of these threads to appear for just an instant, one of these elements of the foundation of the universe, and then manipulating it ever so slightly, we increased gravity in a region by nearly 7,000% in an instant. I will say that again. We manipulated the physical laws of the universe using a bright light and a rock. The assembled audience applauded again. After a moment, Carter held up a hand for quiet. The full manifestation of our research will be available shortly. As soon as our sister projects have finished their studies, in 3 months' time we will present our findings in full to this assembly and take our first step towards a more knowledgeable future. I will say, this sounds very much like Atonement and how that guy increased gravity at certain points. God, I hope this ends in a crossover. I would cry. In the lobby of the auditorium, afterwards, Dr. Williams stood speaking to a group of researchers alongside Dr. Carter and his team. 2 men approached them, and one of them stuck out his hand. Oh, I thought I was not recording. I was going to be so pissed. Dr. Williams, the man said. Absolute pleasure to meet you. Vincent Ahrens, Oxford. I have been fascinated by your work, truly. The taller man smiled. Mr. Ahrens, of course. Always nice to meet a fellow alumni. He looked towards the second of the two. And your friend? Aaron Segal, the man said, following Ahrens' handshake with one of his own. Cornell. Dr. Williams' eyes grew slightly wider. The renowned physician... we'll just say physician. I dare say I half expected you to make this discovery before we did, Dr. Segal. Aaron smiled. Unfortunately, our work of late has taken a different turn. If we were going to solve atomics, we should have done what you did and figured out the geometry first. Your results have been very impressive. Dr. Williams' eyes were pensive. Yes, Dr. Carter has some exceptional work. It's a shame he's going to be discredited. He really has put so much into this project. Aryans did a double take. Wait, what? Before either of them could say anything, they were approached by a dark-eyed woman, slight, with short black hair and a blue dress with long black gloves. She came up behind Dr. Williams and put a hand on his shoulder and whispered in his ear. He nodded. Gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm being called away. He stopped mid-turn. Oh, please forgive me. Mr. Aryans, Dr. Segal, this is Dr. Sophia Light. She's been working closely with Dr. Carter and the rest of the team here in London. And the woman smiled softly and nodded. Charmed, I'm sure. Aaron nodded back while Arians continued to process what he just heard. Williams fiddled with his pocket for a moment and then produced a white card, the 3-arrowed emblem on it. "This is my card, Dr. Segal," he said. "Have your office call this number here when you're still in the city and we'll arrange a proper meeting. Mr. Arians, you're certainly welcome to join as well. An organization is on the very precipice of some truly inspiring work, and we're looking for the brightest minds to lead us." He shrugged. "Something to think about? Until later, gentlemen." Dr. Williams donned his hat and coat and followed Dr. Light out of the parlor. Now, this is now, by the way. That was before Dr. Carter got suckered into becoming a corpse for the 05 Council. So, assumingly, like 1960-something. Now, this is present day. Once upon a time, a man awoke to find he had no memory of who he was or how he'd gotten there. I guess that's Rip Van Winkle? I don't know. Olivia snuck out the studio balconies and plucked the dark, slim cigarette out from behind her ear. She was fishing in her pocket for a lighter when she heard the door slide open. "You know, those things will kill you." Oh, wait, no. "You know, those things will kill you." Anthony Wright did not look like the sort of man who was accustomed to a suit and tie. He wore them as if they were prison fatigues. "I should know," he added, showing her a half-emptied pack of gum. "Anthony!" Olivia's slim figure slipped up against him with the grace of a small, elegant knife. She wrapped her arm around him and hugged him tight. Despite having kicked the habit 5 years ago, the old man still managed to smell like tobacco. I'm so confused. He was chewing a cigar the first story. Whatever. Anthony dropped an enormous arm around her and gave her a comforting pat. They ended up against the banister side by side. It wasn't a quiet morning, yet below them the city streets were cast in a tangerine glow. A cool, lethargic breeze drifted past them, carrying the ocean scent. "I'm glad you made it," Olivia told him. She pulled out her lighter. It was a cheap hunk of neon green plastic she had picked up on the way from the exhibition. After a few swipes from her thumb, it only managed to spit out sparks. "Here." Anthony plucked the lighter out of her hand as if he was taking away a dangerous toy. He produced his own. It was an old tarnished thing made of brass, had more than a few dents than he did. "And I wouldn't miss this for the world, lady, even if it is Seattle." Olivia rolled her eyes. Anthony's lighter produced a flame on the first flick. She dipped her head down to bring the cigarette into the flame's tip. "Spare me. I know you think this is all artsy-fartsy crap." "Well, all right, I can't get the Madonna made out of cottage cheese." I can't get the Madonna made out of cottage cheese." Olivia gave him a look. "You don't like it?" Anthony did a brief double takes. "Wait, that's yours? I mean, She grinned. "No, I'm kidding. That one's shit. The guy who made it is a hack." She turned back towards the city, taking a long drag. When she exhaled, wisps of smoke whirled up from her nostrils and licked the bottom of the balcony overhead. "How's Calvin?" "Doing good. He's told me to tell you he's sorry he couldn't come, but busy. I know. I know." Olivia closed her eyes. There's just so much going on now. "Yeah, I don't really think any of us expected." Anthony's voice trailed off. "They needed the accountant more than we realized. Once they lost him, they lost all their funding. Everything's just started to unravel. Personnel started panicking, sites started collapsing. Fuck, 2 overseers ended up dead that night." Something tugged at the back of Olivia's mind, something she'd been forgetting. "How many sites are left now?" "Still about 200. They decommissioned Site 173 last week. Nothing in it but corpses and cockroaches." He shook his head. "Just ordinary cockroaches." Okay, so this appears to take place 5 years after they killed 0513. Because he was smoking the original and he kicked the habit 5 years ago, so it has to be at least 5 years. And now, the O5 Council is running around with their heads cut off because they've lost all funding. And it looks like 2 overseers ended up dead. So, like, 2 more overseers ended up dead, I guess. So I guess that brings the total to 4 overseers dead. Whatever. Olivia turned to him. For the first time in a long time, he looked old and tired. The wrinkles in his face were carved deep into his skin. His eyes were surrounded by dark, impenetrable circles. She felt that tug again. "How you holding up?" "It's funny," Anthony told her, still watching the city. "You spend your life fighting demons, putting out fires, thinking this is the hard part. This is the work that needs to be done. This is the work that'll kill you. But it's not." His eyes met hers, sweeping up the ashes, putting shit back together. "That's the hard part." She frowned. The tugging was harder now. "Don't get me wrong. Things will be better now." He gave her a weary smile. "We don't have to hurt people. We don't have to kill people. We don't have to mutilate children to hold back the nightmares." His eyes drifted back towards the city. Olivia closed her eyes. "Anthony, I don't know how the hell we did it, but we won. The it's still fucked up. But I go to sleep, I still have nightmares, you know. But every night it gets a little better. The nightmares are losing." She reached back into her pocket and searched for something, pulling it free. "Oh, fuck, sorry. I'm just ranting. Listen, Olivia, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Olivia slammed all 4 inches of a sleek, razor-sharp crafting knife into Anthony Wright's heart. For one instant, the old man's eyes were filled with raw confusion and shock, then stumbling back, numbly clutching at the hilt, his eyes were filled with nothing at all. "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered. She pushed him over the banister's edge, and the world ended. Now. Suddenly, a voice spoke to a man. "Your second wish has been granted. Now for your third and final wish." "Come on, up! Come on, wake the hell up." Slivers of light squeezed through Olivia's eyelids. Oh, by the way, this is also titled Now, so I have no clue what the other Now was, which is 5 years in the future where Olivia kills Anthony. I'm so confused. Slivers of light squeezed through Olivia's eyelids. She felt a constant buzzing in her ears. Someone was tugging at her arm. Wake up, wake up." She popped her eyes open and immediately regretted it. Sharp, jagged sunbeams rushed into her pupils, forcing her to squint. Olivia squeezed one fist into her left socket and started rubbing away. "What? Where am I?" The man stopped shaking her and slumped down into the chair. Fuck. Thank God. Olivia kept rubbing at her eye, letting her vision adjust. She was just laying on a bed inside of a cheap motel room. The overpowered AC rumbled to her left. Above it, sunlight streamed in past curtains. The room smelled faintly of coconut oil. Adam was seated beside the bed. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His laptop was sitting on the nightstand with a pistol laid out next to it. Olivia blinked her way through the grogginess. "Adam, what? How much do you remember?" Olivia squeezed her eyebrows together. They grinded like some cogs in an enormous adding machine. She tried to think of a way through the events that led her here. Last thing she remembered was some sort of dream. Anthony was there, but it was years from now. It was all wrong. Not real. It felt real, but Adam nodded. Something was off, right? Okay, so that last section was a dream from probably an anomalous source. I don't care. Thank God, that makes it so much less confusing. Yeah. Olivia closed her eyes and coaxed the dream out from its hiding place in her subconscious. He wasn't smoking, but he had a lighter. We were in Chicago, but we could smell the ocean. I mean, Seattle, but we could smell the ocean. And the more I thought about it, the more you realized it was a lie. She nodded and opened her eyes. Adam was focused on his laptop. I don't know how, but somehow I realized the only way out of there was... Yeah, Adam cut her off. He was making great pains to not make eye contact with her. I know. Olivia frowned, sitting up on the bed. Adam, do you... Do you want to talk about? It's fine. We're getting out of here now. He was pulling up a file on the computer. You don't remember how we got here, right? Olivia shook her head. No. Same here. Luckily, I planned for this. He double-clicked something. The laptop screen was filled with still images of Calvin's face. His stoic expression stared out at them. Behind him, they could see what looked like an office. Calvin loaded a video on Alexandria. Alexander? No, I've just been calling him Alexander, along with instructions to play if we found ourselves not remembering anything about how we got here. Olivia scooted forward to the edge of the bed beside Adam. He clicked play. A window popped over the video requesting 2 passwords. Over one was the name Adam, and the other was named Olivia. It's encrypted? Olivia asked. She frowned, staring at the screen. I guess. I don't remember. I mean, there's a password I might have used, Adam said, typing something under his name. As soon as he hit enter, his name turned green. He glanced back at her. Olivia bit her bottom lip, thinking. Olivia? Something tugged at the back of her mind. Without stopping to think, she snatched Adam's pistol off the nightstand and buried 3 rounds directly into his skull. And then the world ended. Now. For real this time, maybe. Maybe this one isn't a dream within a dream, like Inception. The man considered this for a moment, and seeing no other choice, his final wish, allow me to remember all that I have forgotten. Olivia. Olivia opened her eyes. She laid inside of a small cot on a comfortable-looking office. There was a bookcase stuffed full of leather-bound volumes. In front of it, there was a wide, polished desk. Calvin was standing over her. He looked distant. Why didn't he? But his expression carried a hint of concern. She immediately slammed her knee into his solar plexus. Calvin buckled, crouching forward. She rolled off the cot and stumbled towards the desk, fumbling for the hidden latch under one of the drawers. Olivia had been in this office 100 times before. If memory served, there was a hidden space right here. By the time Calvin managed to catch his breath, Olivia was pointing the pistol straight at his heart. Calvin raised his hands and took a step back. Olivia, shut up. She narrowed her eyes. Let me think. Calvin said nothing. Someone's fucking with my head. I've been through 2 iterations now. One with Anthony, one with Adam. Each time they were trying to get information out of me. She said, talking her way through it. Each time I realized there was something wrong, a detail out of place. Anthony's lighter, Adam's computer. He calls it Alexander, not Alexandra. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized. Calvin started to lower his hands. Olivia, listen. I said shut up. She snapped back. All right. Each time, it all started unraveling once I realized something was wrong. Each time, I realized the only escape was to... Calvin took a step back. I have to kill you, she whispered. Olivia. Just take it easy. Let's talk through this, all right? I have thought this through. Anthony, Adam, now you're just another dream, another... She pursed his lips. Lie. The liar. You're the fucking liar. Olivia, Calvin's tone was a building urgency. Please, listen to me. You might be right. Someone might be messing with your head, but it's not me. I'm not the liar. Then how the fuck? Her finger curled tighter around the trigger. Listen, just listen, okay? You were helping me with research. You fell asleep in my office. Now you wake up and you've pulled a gun on me. Calvin reached his hands up high. You said these things unraveled when you noticed something was wrong. Have you? Olivia scowled. Not yet, but... Her eyes traced their way through the office. It all looked like it was supposed to. Unlike the previous 2 dreams, it was all familiar to her. But did that mean... You said you started out with a dream about Anthony, and then Adam. Think about it. If I were the liar, would I really start with Calvin next? Anthony's breathing slowed. Olivia's breathing slowed. Nothing out of place, nothing felt off. Once is a happenstance. Thrice is a coincidence. 3 times is a pattern, Calvin told her. I think the liar is trying to trick you into killing me. Her grip tightened on the trigger. Grip loosened on the trigger. You said he was trying to get information from you. What kind of information? With Anthony, I don't know. He needed to ask me something. With Adam, it was a password, I think, but a password? Olivia lowered the pistol with a firm grip. Yeah. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Okay, just give me a second, okay? Calvin slowly lowered his hands and kept his distance. All right, but this doesn't make any sense. You don't have any passwords the liar would know. He didn't ask you anything else. He paused and nodded. He didn't ask you about your copy of the journal, right? You still have it? Olivia shook her head. No, he didn't. Yeah, I still have it. She reached for her free hand to touch the base of her wrist. The faint, familiar lump was still present. The journal's right here. The liar smiled. So it is. The world ended. Now. Funny, the voice laughed, granting the man's final wish. That was the first thing you asked for. Olivia's mouth felt like it was coated in a thin layer of dissolving chalk. It left a faint flavor of peppermint lingering on her tongue. She forced her eyes open, then immediately closed them. Bright, glaring lights beamed straight towards her retinas. The throbbing pressure behind her temple intensified. She was in a hospital room somewhere. Olivia didn't need to look around to know that. She could just feel it. She hated hospitals. Counting backwards from 10, she eased her eyes open and gave them time to adjust. Yep, it was a medical facility, all right. She was strapped down to a bed. Good times. Several pieces of sterile, complicated equipment were placed next to her. Most of them were making beeping noises. She lifted her head as high as the nylon straps allowed, trying to get a lay of the land. A doctor and nurse laid face down on the floor. Pools of crimson crept out from under them. An older woman in immaculate white suit was seated nearby. She held a gun. Her gaze was on Olivia. Olivia blinked. She was wrong. It was a young man with a neon green mohawk. He wore a studded jacket, splattered with something wet. In his left hand, he clutched a blood-soaked switchblade. She blinked again. It was a person of indeterminable gender. Their skin was a deep shade of arc gray. What is that? Atre? Yellowish orange. Okay. Their skin was a deep shade of yellowish orange, a face full of piercings. They wore several leather straps around what looked like a charcoal binder. Instead of a knife, they held an aluminum baseball bat. It was coated with clumps of hair and meat. She blinked again. A man with teeth like serrated steak knives and claws that could carve through steel. She blinked again. It was Anthony. She blinked again. It was Adam. She blinked again. It was Calvin. She blinked again. It was the liar. How's that cut feel? Olivia looked down at her wrist. A fresh series of stitches crisscrossed over a recently opened wound. It extended from the base of her palm to nearly the inside of her elbow. A distant memory tugged at the back of her mind. She licked her lips and lied. It doesn't hurt that much. Still, make sure to keep it covered. Antibiotics, too. The left side of the liar's mouth twitched upwards. They would have prescribed something for it, but afraid I've killed them before they had the opportunity. Who? Olivia's eyes fell to the figures on the floor. What's going on? Who are they? They worked for me, and they captured you, the liar told her. You were brought to me for processing, to discover what you knew, to determine if you had the journal, or, at very least, if you knew what was in it. Their lips pierced with amusement. You know, after all this time, I had forgotten it ever existed. When the agent who penned it defected and told us what it contained, you have thought we might have taken a few steps to make sure its contents untrue, but we are nothing of creatures of habit. Olivia couldn't remember anything after they killed the accountant. The liar must have noticed her confusion. You've been amnesticized, several times actually. Did you know that's my primary function within the Foundation? To maintain the veil, to make sure no one remembers anything they're not supposed to? They tapped the weapon against their thigh, and of course to replace those gaps with convincing lies. Why am I still alive? Why are we having this conversation? Because you and your friends accounted for this. Because you did have the journal, or at least a small piece of it. A subdermal flesh drive located under your wrist. I don't understand. The liar smiled. Although Olivia could no longer recognize their features, she could still make out the weariness in their face. Not all cognohazards are anomalies. A code phrase flashed inside Olivia's mind. It was as if she had just found a piece of a puzzle she hadn't realized she was solving. An image surged into her memories. Now she remembered everything. "You used to be one of us," she whispered. "Now you used to be a part of the insurgency. You were a part of the 3rd Delta. I heard Anthony talking about you. Sam Biel. They always talked about how you were tortured by the Foundation for weeks for your secrets and never gave up a word." I don't understand." The liar closed her eyes. "That's true, but I don't give up my memory because there were no memories to give up." Okay, so she used to be a part of the insurgency, and then she amnesticized herself. Okay. They sighed. "I was deployed to locate an anomaly in the Bengal Sea. Our ship capsized in a storm, and I was dragged into the ocean when I had my leg caught on some netting. I drifted in the darkness where the eyes are empty, and I sunk into the void. They found me months later, and the Foundation recognized who I was, what I could do. They gave me to the Green, that witch, and she gave me a new identity, a lie to believe in." They opened their eyes and rose to their feet, approaching Olivia. "Your friend Calvin found out from the journal, no doubt, that clever boy. Your copy only had that entry in it, the entry containing my name. Seeing it for the first time in so many years, it was like coming up from water after so long." The liar began to unbind Olivia's limbs. "I've cleared a path to the front entrance. It will be open for another 10 minutes. Once you're out, you'll find a gray van in the parking lot. The doors are unlocked and the keys are in the glove compartment. You'll find an instructions map and a flash drive." "A flash drive?" Olivia sat up, feeling her extremities tingle with the surge of blood. Her forearm pulsed with pain. "It contains crucial data. It includes the location of your next target. The archivist." The liar stepped back. "Out of all of us, she may be the furthest gone. Tell your friend to be careful." Olivia nodded, swinging her legs around. She sank to the floor. "What about you?" "What about me?" the liar asked, and they laughed. "I'm not faultless in this. I may have forgotten my purpose, but it was still me in there making those decisions, doing the things I did. There's nothing left for me out there. If the Foundation doesn't kill me immediately, I'll spend the rest of my life running from them because of what I know. And I'm not about to run from the truth. The truth has set me free." They sank back into their chair, laying their weapons across their lap. "Move fast. Your window is closing." Olivia reached out to touch the liar's hand. They did not look up. Turning to go, she spared one last look at them. For a moment, she thought she might have recognized a face. Then she made her way out of the hall and towards the exit. It wasn't until then she heard that single, lonely shot. The Liar Journal Entry. The 11th Overseer. 0511 is one of the most interesting personalities on the Council, as they don't appear to have any defined personality at all. The 11th Overseer is often called the Liar, a name given to them due to the nature of their work. They are the individual in charge of maintaining the Foundation's deceit operations, those departments dedicated towards convincing the world at large that neither the Foundation nor the monsters in their care exist. However, the exact nature of 0511 is still a mystery. At times, it seems as if position has been filled by many different people simultaneously. The reason for this seemed at first unclear. However, documents recovered from several early council meetings indicated that the Overseer was a single person, and who that person was surprised even me. According to these documents, the individual known as 0511 is actually a powerful polymorph, one capable of changing their identity from one to another at will. This allows them to act with discretions, and there are situations where it would come advantageous that they would not be identified. Furthermore, the name that appears on the official record for their first meeting is none other than Sam Beale, a former insurgency agent who was presumed killed after a shipping accident off the coast of Bangladesh. Now, this struck me as particular indeed. Why would an agent of the insurgency, an organization known for its policy of suicide over capture against any odds, be sitting on the council of the SCP Foundation? The more I began digging, the stranger the story became. My sources in the area described an incident where a fisherman reported a ship being pulled from the bottom of the ocean, and the men recovering the ship finding a person on board alive, despite being underwater for days, if not weeks. The report indicates that the Foundation quickly moved in to apprehend the subject, who was not seen again afterwards. 0511 simply appeared on the council afterwards with no explanation. The story continued to perplex me. If it was not until I recovered a recording of a meeting between a junior chairman of the Ethics Committee and Site 305 director that the truth began to come into focus. According to those men, the overseer was frequently meeting with the overseer known as Green, and the subjects of their meetings were the recovery of 0511's identity. However, despite their best effort, it seems that they were unable to recreate the identity of Sam Beale, but were able to create an absence of another personality, other identities, each aware and cooperative with each other. And then a breakthrough. By nothing more than chance, I stumbled across this newspaper clipping from a Guatemalan city where one of the known aliases of 0511 had been involved in an accident involving the death of a local politician. There were several witnesses to the crime. However, none of these individuals present seemed to be able to recall any details about the event. This was, I thought, remarkable, as amnestic technology that advanced had not yet been discovered, and I thought that they were seeing a breakthrough in Foundation capabilities. However, that was not the case. Other recovered documents indicate that they were still working on the compound that would later eventually lead to the modern Class A amnestic at the time this incident took place. Instead, it is now believed that the reason the witnesses were able to recall what had happened is the overseer itself, which apparently can exhibit an anomalous amnestic property at will. This, at the time, was nothing short of revolutionary. Over time, eventually after the discovery of the compound the Foundation calls Y909, the overseer's active influence in disinformation campaigns began to wane. However, their involvement in organizing those campaigns increased considerably. The Foundation had a department of disinformation, but the 11th overseer completely revitalized the field and created the Department of Public Awareness and Perception Management with themselves at the head. I am left, though, with the lingering doubt that the nature of Sam Beale involved in this case. While it seems possible that the inclusion of their name on the first report was simply a mistake of some kind or a mocking jab at the insurgency, who would later go on to claim that Sam was captured and tortured by the Foundation despite evidence to the contrary, this seems like an outcome without purpose, especially considering the great lengths that I or anyone else would have to go through to get their hands on that document. So I am left with a thought. Perhaps it is indeed coincidence, or perhaps the person that pulled from the waters of the Bengal Sea was Sam Beale, and that they lost any memory of themselves in those dark waters for a long time they were down there. Perhaps, in becoming the 11th overseer, they lost the person they had been, and despite the Foundation's efforts to recover that person and learn what they could about the insurgency, they were unable to bring them back from the dark. And maybe that blank slate that remained when the thing that Sam Beale was, a perfect vessel for a variety of personalities and abilities, all of which collectively culminated into an identity of the 11th Overseer, who, by the time the Foundation realized had assumed command of one of their most powerful departments, had made them all forget they had ever not been there. Signed, L. Okay, so this is the end to this video because it's 2 hours long and my throat actually hurts. So what have we got so far? SCP-001 is seemingly just a plan to kill the... Hold on, let me go back to it. The way it is, yeah. It is just a plan to kill the 05 Council by the Chaos Insurgency, of course. And what's happening so far? Okay, so far in the story, we've got Calvin assembles, he finds a vial from the Fountain of Youth, and a journal by an unwritten Global Occult Coalition person called L about the Overseers, where they could be, what they're like. He then sets into motion a plan to kill all the Overseers and end the Foundation that way, cutting the head off the snake, basically. So he assembles a team, he goes out into the middle of the ocean and kills the living corpse of 0513, which the Foundation coerced into making a deal with Death, so that Death would become 0513, and 0513 would remain infinitely close to Death, so that no Overseers could die. They killed 0513, so all Overseers can die. Next, they tracked down the accountant, and through sheer unpredictability, managed to kill him with a revolver. Next, 0511, the liar, captures Olivia, ties her to a bed, and forces her into 3 dreams, where she reveals the location of a journal in her arm. However, the journal is only an entry about 0513. You see, 0513 was once an insurgency agent called Sam Biol. However, they fell into waters containing SCP-3000, had their memory completely erased, was captured by the Foundation. The Foundation, realizing they had a perfect blank slate, created multiple personalities within this person and set them as the Disinformation Unit. The Disinformation Unit then, in turn, made the Council forget that they were never not a part of the Council. So basically, they tricked the Council into believing they were always there. And then, when reading this entry from the journal they tore out of Olivia's arm, 0511, Sam Biol, realizes, holy crap, I'm Sam Biol. I used to hate these guys, and gives Olivia a chance to escape and kills themselves. So that's 3 05s down so far, and we've got 10 more to go, and I will finish them tomorrow when I give my voice adequate time to rest. Yeah, this one's really good so far. I actually really like this so far. So, good job. I don't know how to say his name still, but DJ Caddis, or Caddis, I don't know. DJ Caddis, really good job so far. Man, keep up the good work.